I'm in my car today. I'm on a mission to find a very specific reference photo to paint here in Phoenix. I have a very specific spot in mind. It's one that I've driven by several times, and I'm going to show you my thought process as far as where I get reference photos from, even in a giant concrete jungle like Phoenix. So the spot I have in mind is on the way to a trail that I hike quite frequently out in South Mountain. It's this little patch of greenery in the middle of this neighborhood. And there's these palm trees in this field, this little clump of palm trees, and I really like the way that they look in the field. I've driven by there several times and I always forget to take a picture. So today I'm going all the way down there just to get this picture because the lighting is just about perfect right now. It's about 3:30 in the afternoon in early September, so we should get some nice shadows. Phoenix really is just endless freeways that just go on forever and ever and ever. But in the midst of all of this concrete, you can find really, really interesting places if you keep your eye open. That's something I really struggled with when I was first learning how to paint, is knowing what to paint. Because it seems like there's an infinite amount of options, but at the same time, sometimes it seems like there are no options depending on where you live. So if you live in a giant city like this might be a helpful video for you. Found it. So this is an old orange grove, and there's these palm trees, this little cluster of palm trees right there. I really like the way they look in this field. So I need to find a good angle, I'll take a picture, and we'll go back and paint it. I think I want an angle where you can actually see the shadows going across, something like this. Yeah, I like that. That'll work just fine. I actually like this angle better. I like that you've got this orange tree right here in the foreground, and the shadow can kind of connect to that, up to the trees, and then over to the houses in the background. That'll give a nice shape that goes across the whole composition. Let's head back and paint this. So as you're out driving around your city or town, if you just kind of keep your eyes peeled for little scenes like that, and if you keep practicing it enough, they will just jump out at you. At first it takes a lot of effort to train your mind to see things in terms of potential things to paint, but it definitely pays off if you practice it long enough. And this right here is South Mountain. There's tons of really cool hiking trails up in there. Really nice, beautiful houses in this area of town. In fact, I see one right there. Right there, that one. I might paint that too. That just popped right out to me. The way you've got that kind of stair-step shape in the house and how it sits in that desert landscape. I am 100% going to paint that. I'm glad I kept driving around. See, this is what I mean. Scenes just pop out to you. So I'm gonna get a picture of that, and that will definitely be another painting as well. And here we are, back in the studio with air conditioning. It was really hot out there, but luckily the heat is starting to go away. It's very slowly, but it is leaving. So I'm just preparing my paper with this sponge, just wetting it down on both sides, trying to spread the water around the paper evenly so that it doesn't buckle up. And wetting it down like this helps it lay flat without having to tape it down. So you can see the sketch that I've made there based on that reference photo that I took. We've got that orange tree in the middle right side of the frame, which leads on over to those palm trees And that orange tree and the palm trees are connected by that shadow. And then the palm trees connect over to those background trees and structures, buildings in the background. And then those shapes lead over to the left side of the frame. And then there's a very simple sky that we're going to paint in with just the faintest hint of clouds towards the horizon. So I'm going to start mixing up a sky color. Since it's a very light sky, it's going to be mostly cerulean blue. I'm going to throw in some lavender and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And the lavender is just to take the edge off to make it slightly less vibrant. Tones it down just a little bit. So just painting around the shape of those clouds, leaving them mostly white. Then I can take a damp paper towel and I can scrub out some more fuzzy cloud shapes here and there. The damp paper towel trick is really good for getting those kind of cirrus clouds, the really feathery, fuzzy clouds. I find it works better than a dry paper towel, actually. So this is the first wash, which will be for the lightest colors in the painting. We are painting all of the light colors in the first wash. So the roof of that building in the background, that reddish color, and we're going to start dropping in this beautiful, vibrant green grass. This green is like spring green, even though it's not spring right now. This is September when this photo was taken and when I'm recording this. But here in Arizona, we get what's called second spring with the monsoon that comes every year. Some years it comes stronger than others. This year has been a fairly decent one. And so with all that new rain, you get all this grass that just pops up everywhere in late summer. And to get that vibrant, bright green, I just mix some cadmium yellow right into that cerulean blue. I find that makes a very satisfying bright green. And it's a nice contrast to that dark, rich green of the orange tree. Yes, this is actually a very old orange grove, a remnant of what used to be everywhere here in the valley. There used to be orange groves as far as the eye could see, and most of them have been filled in by subdivisions, by houses that all look exactly the same. But here and there you can still find little pockets where the orange groves persist, and this is one of them that I just stumbled across. Little remnants of Phoenix's ancient past. Not ancient, but ancient to me, I guess. So you see that I left those patches of dirt white, and I'm now filling them in with just a very light brownish color, which is just burnt umber and a little bit of burnt sienna. So I'm going to drop in those very far away background trees, which are essentially just a dark blue-gray color. And making them blue will help push them farther back in the composition. And you'll also notice that I modified the scene from the reference photo right in that spot. There's houses and things there, but I decided to leave a gap and just have trees to give the photo, or rather to give the painting another layer of depth, as if you were seeing way back into the landscape. Now, while this grass is damp, I'm going to start dropping in some of the darks for the shadows. This is called painting wet into wet, and this is one of the magical things about watercolor. You see how the edges of these shapes I'm dropping in are fuzzy? I really wanted to convey the fluffiness and the fuzziness of that grass, and this is exactly how you do that. It's actually the exact same technique you would use to paint clouds. It's exactly the same. And you'll see that I keep going back and reworking the grass as it dries slowly. But for now, I'm just dropping in the big, basic shapes. Adding a little bit of texture on that patch of dirt. Also, wet into wet. I want those shapes to be a little fuzzy and a little soft. Understanding how wet your paper is absolutely crucial when painting watercolor, and understanding what kind of effect you're going to get based on how wet or dry your paper is, and also how much water is in your brush. So I'm pre-mixing a few colors to start working on those palm trees. Some darker green and a dark brownish gray for the trunks. Before I do that, I'm going to drop in those trees on the left side of the frame, which are closer than the very far away trees, but farther away than the palm trees. So I still want them to be a little more blue, but darker in tone. This will be part of the middle value. Dropping in some more shadow area on the edge of that grass there, bordering that patch of dirt. It's still damp, so it's going to be nice and fuzzy. Darkening it up just a little more. Don't be afraid to push your darks. Remember that watercolor dries several tones lighter than when you first put it on the paper. So you've got to push the value just a little bit when you first put the paint down. Doing the same thing here, just adding in some of those darks while it's still damp. Trying to vary my brush strokes. I don't want to paint the exact same brush stroke every time because then it will look stiff and unnatural. You want to add a little bit of randomness to it. The grass still has a long way to go to look how I want it, but this is off to a great start. Now our paper is dry, completely dry, so I can start working on the sharper details without having things fuzz out on me. Again, the importance of understanding wet paper versus dry paper and what's going to happen when you put the paint down on the paper. If the paper is dry, your paint's not going to move. It's going to stay right where you put it. If it's damp, it's going to fuzz and it's going to bleed. So, dropping in the trunks of these palm trees here. I just love the way that these palm trees sit in this field. It caught my eye the first time that I drove by here, and I thought to myself, man, I need to take a picture of this and paint it. So that area where those dead palm fronds hang down, forming a little skirt, I just dropped a little bit of yellow ochre into that mix. to make it slightly more yellowish. And then we're going to start dropping in that kind of dark gray green for the fronds. Now you'll notice that these palm trees are essentially silhouetted against the sky. So the colors are going to be more grayed and subdued. But there is still plenty of color variation happening within that shape of the palm trees if you look closely. I'll zoom in on the photo and you can really see what I'm talking about. At first glance, it doesn't really look like there's any color, but there is tons of color variation going on. It's just all in middle and dark value range. And we're going to connect these palm trees all into one continuous shape, which is then going to connect into the shadow that they cast on the ground, which is then going to connect to the orange tree in the foreground. And I'm spending quite a bit of time to really make sure I capture the details of the texture of these palm trees. The little spiky protrusions off of the trunks, the featheriness of the fronds. Palm trees are just so interesting. They have so much character. They've always fascinated me ever since I was a kid, and I grew up here, so I've been around palm trees my whole life. Fun fact about palm trees in Phoenix, Arizona, not a single one of them is native to Arizona. They are all imported, mostly from California, Mexico. These are probably California fan palms. But there's one tiny area in southwestern Arizona near Yuma, in a place called Palm Canyon, where there are actually wild palm trees growing natively. They were probably brought there by some animal however many thousands of years ago. But any other palm tree that you see in Arizona was either brought there by a human or the result of one that was brought here by a human. Because they just produce thousands of seeds and they drop them everywhere, and then they just grow like crazy. Especially in places that are irrigated or near riverbeds. So I'm just going to keep working on these palm trees, getting that texture right, capturing the personality, letting all the colors flow into each other within this shape. Make a powerful silhouette that really stands out against that sky. And you see how these palm trees are sitting right in front of those very far distant trees in the far, far background. I just love how that makes that sense of scale pop. It makes it so three-dimensional, like you could just walk into the painting. And there's a little guy hiding in the background there. I'm just going to drop that one in real quick. I'm dropping in those orange trees in the background. That'll separate the field from the houses that are just behind those. And we're going to drop in the shadow for that house or whatever that is in the background. helping separate that from the field even more. Forming part of that nice middle value shape. Now we're gonna drop in that orange tree. Really looks more like an orange bush, but it is a tree. Nice rich dark green. And towards the edge of the shape, I'm trying to hint at the texture of the leaves, the shape of the leaves. But in the middle of the shape, in the body of the shape, I'm just blocking it in for the most part. I'm leaving a few highlights here and there. And I do really want to emulate the shiny leaves. They're very shiny and glossy, and they have a little sparkle to them. So at the very end, I will come back with some gouache and I'll add some highlights for that. I want to do the same thing for that grass that's just below the tree. See how it's kind of sparkly and shiny? Gouache is going to be my friend for that too. And we're just going to go straight into the darks with this orange tree. It's a very, very, very dark green. And this will absolutely be the darkest object in the scene, which will help bring it forward and push everything else back. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb, is objects tend to have higher contrast the closer they are to you, and less so the farther away they are. We're creating the illusion of a 3D world on a two-dimensional piece of paper with some pigment. So we got to use every trick in the book to make it convincing. Now I'm just going back and adding in some darks for these palm trees, just some texture for the fronds. Moving my brush in these kind of spiky patterns, trying to emulate the texture of the palm fronds. Painting in a spiky way, I guess you could say. We're going to take just a light gray and gently brush it over this dirt area to give it some extra texture. Doing some dry brushing, which is letting the brush skip over the surface of the paper. And do the same thing in the grass with just a slightly darker green than is already on the paper. Getting a bigger brush out, and I'm just going to kind of move it back and forth. I got the bristles splayed out, so they got some teeth, and I'm painting in these vertical motions to simulate the vertical arrangement of the grass. scratching out some light grass at the base of that orange tree. Yeah, you've really got to work grass and be patient with it in order to get it right. A problem I would always have with grass is I would just stop working on it way too soon. But having a brush like this where you can splay it out helps a ton for painting grass. I mean, just look how much more realistic that immediately looks. It's not like it looked bad before, but now it's just, okay, that looks like a grassy field. Adding some birds in the sky, which are really just little lines and dots, but since they're in the sky and since they're arranged in a way that looks like a flock of birds, they're birds. Your brain will just assume that that's what they are. It's crazy what you can get away with in painting. Now we've let the paper dry completely, again, and we're gonna add those finishing touches with gouache. So just a few highlights on that orange tree to show the glistening leaves. I'm basically drawing these little tiny lines that change direction, essentially simulating the edges of those leaves catching the light. Just enough to get the idea across. I'm gonna add just a few highlights on the palm trees because you can see a few in the photo where the edges of some of those fronds are catching the light. Since these are silhouetted, there's not too much of that going on. And then splattering some of that gouache in that grass, make it nice and sparkly. And we have ourselves a finished painting. Really hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different, me showing you my process of actually finding the scene and how I go about interpreting it and turning it into a painting. So if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.